I am Grady of This Mormon Life, and this is another episode of the Third Hour of Power. I am joined this week by our friends, Heather of LDS Youth Leadership. Heather, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Grady. Thanks for having me back again. It's always good to be on here with you.
I love it. And I think it's so funny. I wish that we can sometimes record just like outtakes, because typically our episodes are twice as long because you and I just keep talking afterwards after we click stop on the recording. But the content's always great. So for those of you joining us today, you are in for a treat. We're going to have some great things to talk about, especially because this lesson is chapter 7 from the Gordon B. Hinckley manual, which is Whisperings of the Spirit, which for me was just a wonderful topic. I don't know about you, Heather, but the first thing that I loved about this episode was the section about from the life of Gordon B. Hinckley. That story, did that one resonate with you?
Which story was it? Was the one
Perfect, and I'll
tackle
it then.
What it was.
I loved it so much that in case you loved it as well, I didn't want to steal it. But it was basically the story of when Gordon B. Hinckley was being set apart as a stake president. He was really nervous about, the mantle of being a stake president, the realization that you have to receive revelation for so many people. And President Harold B. Lee, who was a member of the Quorum of the 12 at the time, who set him apart, he gave him this advice. He said, listen for the whisperings of the Spirit in the middle of the night and respond to those whisperings. Gordon B. Hinckley goes on to say that I don't know any revelation. I don't know why revelation comes sometimes in the night, but it does. It comes in the day as well, of course. But listening to the Spirit, whisperings of the Spirit, the gift of revelation, those are the things that you're entitled to. And maybe it's just because at night things are calmer. There's not as much distraction in the world that is competing with the Holy Ghost, or I should say, not competing with the Holy Ghost, but competing for your attention. That whisperings that come at night are just that much easier. I mean, have you noticed anything like that before, Heather?
Our minds are more quiet, and I've noticed a lot of times for me, the Spirit strikes the hardest first thing in the morning when I'm waking up. But it's the same thing. Our minds are quiet. We're not occupied with a whole bunch of other things yet, and so I notice for me, I am a first thing in the morning inspiration kind of person. But I think at night too, and we'll talk about this in a minute. But I was reviewing a talk that Elder Scott gave about personal revelation, and he talks about dreams as a form of personal revelation, and those are really rare for me. But I have had a couple. The Spirit finds ways to reach us and speak to us that are unique to us, and that's one of the things I love, is because He knows us. He finds ways to reach us if we're open and willing to listen.
Yeah, and I want to jump to that, but before we get there, because you brought up something that I really liked, was the idea of the morning. In the section from the life of President Hinckley, he had just that. He was in Hong Kong, and they wanted to build a temple there, but I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of Hong Kong. There is zero real estate in Hong Kong. I mean, it's already built out. It's a huge metropolis. And so he was really wondering what he's going to do. He knows that the people here need a temple, but he has no idea where they can put it. And he says that he woke up in the morning, and the Spirit said, "Why are you worried about this? You have a wonderful piece of property with a mission home and a small chapel stand. They're in the very heart of Kowloon, and the location has the best transportation." And he says, "Build a building of several stories. It can include a chapel and classrooms on the first 2 floors and a temple on the top 2 or 3 floors." And he says, after I got that revelation, he was at peace, and he went back to sleep. And it's just what an amazing revelation, because something like that to say, using the temple is almost like a and they use that same style, that same idea in New York City. I got to go to the Manhattan Temple. So interesting because, it looks like a temple, but it also looks like a building on a city street. And so you go inside, and there's, a desk there, and you go one way to the chapel and then another way to the elevator that then takes you up to the temple. And what a smart use of property to say, hey, we can use this for more than one thing.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I love, because sometimes we look at a problem and we see it in our own little narrow way. But if we take the time to ponder and let the Spirit help us, and we stick with it and we're persistent, we can come up with solutions that are way, way better than what we could have come up with on our own. And I love that story because I think that's a great example of that. It's a matter of just looking at it a little bit differently.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about what you just alluded to, was the idea of dreams and the way that the Spirit talks to us.
Okay. Did you want me to elaborate on that?
Did you have more on that piece?
I didn't. There were some other parts of this talk from Elder
Oh, yeah,
Scott
go for it.
that I wanted to highlight. But this ties in with what President Hinckley talks about, how you keep the Spirit with you at all times, the importance of living worthy of it. And I thought that what Elder Scott said about it was really good. But I'll start with some of what President Hinckley says. He says, you live worthy of it. You live worthy of the Spirit of the Lord. That is what you do, and you will have it. Just live right. Stay away from the sleaze. Stay away from pornography. Stay away from these things that pull you down. The books you read, the magazines you read, the videos you look at, the television programs that you look at, the shows you go to, all have an effect on you and will do if you subject yourself to the influence of those titillating kinds of things which are designed to make you poor and somebody else rich. Stay away from them. I love how President Hinckley would always just lay it out there on the table and be very straightforward and blunt. And
I can imagine him saying that too, like especially sleaze. That's totally a President Hinckley word. Like you just see him using his hand, telling you, "Stay away from the sleaze." Like totally what he would say.
I can see him doing that too. But that got me thinking, one of the things that helps me feel the Spirit is spending time out in nature and physical activity. And so yesterday I went out for a short hike and it was raining. And so I bundled up in my rain gear so I wouldn't get all wet. And there was nobody on the trail. I was there by myself and it was beautiful and quiet and peaceful. I had the sound of the rain and the sound of this little stream running by. And at times when the rain let up, you could hear the birds chirping a little bit in the background. It was magical. I mean, the peace and the stillness was wonderful. And while I was out there on that trail, because I had read through this the day before, I was thinking about this and thinking, well, okay, so what do I want to share? What impressed me about this? And that was when I remembered Elder Scott's talk. And this is one of my favorite talks on personal revelation. So if you want me to send you a link to put in the show notes for it, I can do that.
Please. Yeah, that will be there. So if you guys want to read more about this talk and share it in a lesson, definitely go to this-mormon-life.com. It'll be in the show notes for this episode.
Yeah, and he talks about different things that help us to feel the Spirit. And a lot of them were the ones that you typically hear, but there were a couple that he mentioned that I thought were kind of different and out of the box. And so one of them he talks about is actually having a good sense of humor. Which is great. And if you're now, he talks about not going overboard and being, too loud and too crass and things like that. But having a good sense of humor actually helps us to feel the Spirit. And then he talks about how he talks about basically obeying the word of wisdom and how that help us obey. Wow. Okay. I can't talk. And how that helps us to feel the Spirit. And so he said, exercise, reasonable amounts of sleep, and good eating habits increase our capacity to receive and understand revelation. We will live for our appointed lifespan. However, we can improve both the quality of our service and our well-being by making careful, appropriate choices.
Yeah, I love that, especially just the idea that, especially when you think about when you are not only just word of wisdom, but things that inhibit your ability to choose and your ability to receive revelation. When you're under the influence of drugs, you can't even make your own conscious decisions, let alone be able to receive inspiration and revelation of what to do. And, if you find yourself in a dangerous, unsafe situation, it'll be really hard for the Spirit to make a connection with you because you're not in a place where you can receive and to hear that.
Yeah. I can't speak for everyone, but I know for me that I enjoy exercise, and a lot of times I do feel the Spirit when I exercise. Or it helps me. I'm naturally a very anxious person. And so one of the things that exercising does for me is it actually helps me spend down all that nervous energy so that my
Oh,
mind
yeah.
is clear. And I wonder sometimes if maybe that was what Elder Scott was getting at, but I think you could probably come up with multiple reasons why that would help you to feel the Spirit.
Yeah.
Our bodies are temples. We're meant to take care of them, and when we take care of them, it helps us to feel the Spirit.
Well, and I like what you bring up too about the humor piece, because I think one of the past episodes we talked about this, but just the idea that the world doesn't need more cynics. The world doesn't need more people that can just expose all the flaws in everything that's out there. The Lord needs more people that are happy and can roll along with maybe things that don't go so well and say, you know what, that's what it is. Let's just keep moving and laugh about it and move forward. I have one of my blog posts I have on the site that talks about 5 things that I wish my mission president told me, because my mission president, my last one, and I don't think we saw eye to eye very well. And so his parting words to me were, Elder Kerr, don't go inactive. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Thank you for that. It was awful. And so I was not excited about that. But one of the letters he wrote home was to my parents when I was on my mission, that Elder Kerr was being light-minded. Mm-hmm. And my dad, who is amazing, wrote back to my mission president and said, Grady is not light-minded. He's very light-hearted, and he doesn't take things too seriously, but he takes the gospel very seriously. And I think that you are misunderstanding our son, which is why my dad is amazing, because he knew who I was. My mission president didn't know who I was. He didn't. I guess I should say he didn't know me, but my dad did. And so it's just nice to know that even though there's people that might be willing to give us advice and tell us things that we've got maybe problems we're trying to solve, we might tell our friends and they'll give you some advice, but really the person that we need to get our advice from when it comes to getting revelation is the Lord, because he knows us. He doesn't just know who we are, but he knows us intimately. And so when it comes to when we need revelation, we need answers to problems that we need to solve, we need to go to the Lord and then prepare ourselves to be ready to receive those whisperings that come from the Holy Spirit.
Absolutely. And when people give us feedback, we also have an opportunity to take that, if it's a matter of concern for us, to take it to the Lord and ask him, because he knows whether or not it's something that we should take seriously or not.
Yeah. Well, Heather, is there any other last minute things you want to add to this episode?
Yes. And, as I'm thinking about this might actually fit in a little better with what we were talking about earlier about how dreams are a form of revelation. I think maybe we can tie that in there. I loved what President Hinckley said about how people would ask him, how does revelation come to the prophet of a church? Mm-hmm. And then, I'll fast forward just a little bit, and he says, well, that's the way it is. There's a still small voice that comes in response to prayer. It comes by the whispering of the Spirit. It may come in the silence of the night. And then this made me think of Elder Bednar's video series.
Patterns of Light?
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably have seen, I'm sure you've seen them.
I love those. I'll put those in the show notes as well.
Yeah. And it made me think of, those 3 analogies he uses. The light switch, where sometimes it just, bam, hits you like that, which in all honesty, most of the time is very rare for me. And, or it's like a sunrise where it's this gradual thing where you finally, where you start to see, it starts to become clear to you. Or like walking in fog. And life feels, I think, in a lot of ways like walking in fog. You just get to see a little bit. You have to take the next step before you.
The further you move, the more you see.
Yes. And so as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking about dreams, and now I'm wishing I had Elder Scott's talk up here in front of me and what he said about dreams. But one of the things that I've noticed is I rarely ever remember my dreams. Yeah. And so for me, one of the ways that I know that it might be personal revelation and the Spirit talking to me is A, first of all, I remember it, but B, also what was the feeling of the dream? I had a dream one time about my deceased grandfather, and it was at a time in my life when I was feeling very inadequate and like I couldn't handle things. And it was a very, very short dream. All I remember was these arms around me. And I could tell by the way the arms looked and felt that it was my grandfather. I didn't even see his face. And then I heard his voice, and he said, "I am so very, very proud of you." And that was it. And then I woke up. And it was a wonderful dream, but I'll tell you, to wake up after a dream like that and realize that it's not real, that kind of hurt a little bit. But I think because, and this is years later, because I can clearly recollect what took place. I think that was a message from the Spirit. I honestly think that was one of those dreams that was a revelatory dream for me.
Yeah, and it sounds like one of those kind of tentpole moments in your testimony, to just be like, okay, that's something I can hold on to. One of the things that I love, there was a songwriter, I can't remember who it was, but they would keep a recorder next to their bed because I think it was Mariah Carey. And she would wake up in the middle of the night with like song ideas in her head. And so she'd grab the recorder and she'd, sing the song into it or record the words, whatever it was, because she knew if she went to bed, she'd forget it. And so, sometimes, you might have those inspirations in the middle of the night, those dreams or even whisperings. But then if you have those, go and write them down really fast so that, you don't forget those things, because, revelation comes in all sorts of ways, and we make sure that we're ready to record that, because if we don't, memories fade, and even feelings of the Spirit can fade if we're not continually nourishing them or acting on the things that are there, because the Spirit is really small. And one of the things I just want to share, just kind of in closing, I love, he talks about Elijah, and when he goes and he's watching the valley and he sees the fire and the earthquake and the storm, but the Lord wasn't in any of those things. It was after all those things had passed, it was the still small voice, and that's where the Spirit was. That's where the voice of God was. Mendelssohn wrote a wonderful oratorio about Elijah's life, and one of the songs in it is about that experience and that story, and it does a wonderful job of painting the contrast of things that are flashy and loud and maybe even exciting, but then contrasting it to what the Spirit is and how it feels. And the music feels how the Spirit feels. And so, if you want to kind of get a better understanding of how to feel the Spirit, go back. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Go to that and listen to that, and it will help. If you're having trouble kind of relaying what that contrast is, it's a great job. It's a great teaching tool too. If you're a teacher, bring that track with you and just play it so people can see the voice of the world versus the voice of the Lord. Heather, tell us more about what's happening over at LDS Youth Leadership.
What isn't? Prince of Peace kicked off today. Actually, the video went live yesterday. We were expecting it today, but it was a nice surprise to have it launch a day early. So right now, what I'm doing is I have a post up right now that is a collection of short testimonies. Some of them are my readers, some of them are LDS bloggers. Short testimonies about how the Savior is a source of peace in their lives. I am about to get an Easter resource page up, and this is just happening like right now. I am in the middle of talking to Heidi Swap, who is LDS. She has a pretty prominent social media outlet, but her son took his life back in 2015, and so we're going to spend. She's volunteered to share her story and about how the atonement has brought her peace through that. And since I write for youth leaders, and sometimes suicide is a serious issue that we deal with, I felt like that was a great opportunity to get to talk to her about that.
I think it's a wonderful thing, because I do think that is becoming more and more of a problem. I'm just so surprised. I shouldn't say surprised. I'm shocked and saddened that is something that it's not just the rough kids that are going through that trial and facing that. It's kids that are good, kids that are doing what they're supposed to do, but facing hardships or depression, and so being able to have tools to prevent that for you, but then again having tools for parents that if that's part of their experience, having tools to help them cope and to find peace. So I think it's amazing. Where can someone find that? Is that Elder over at, or will it be over at ldsuleadership.com?
It will be. This happened. This started less than 24 hours ago. So, but yes, you'll be able to find it at ldsuleadership.com. And my hope is by the end of next week or right at the beginning of Holy Week, we'll have something up and ready to go.
Perfect. Yeah, there's a lot going on right now with social media, especially with General Conference coming up, this weekend or has passed, depending on what day you're listening, and with Easter coming up and a lot of the Prince of Peace initiative the church is trying to share. We have our post. I actually wrote a blog post about my little sister Summer and about kind of what she went through when she decided to spend some time away from the church and then return, and how hard it was to come back with a mixed faith family and have the kids come along with the kids. So check that out. The other thing I just shared right now was LDS Deseret Book has a new audiobook membership site. So they've already got their app, which is Deseret Bookshelf, where you can buy ebooks, buy audiobooks, listen to them. Well, now they got Bookshelf Plus. And on Bookshelf Plus, you get access to hundreds and thousands of ebooks and audiobooks that you can listen to unlimited of. There's no credits, like you get one book a month. Like you can listen all you want. And so I shared some of the books that I've read recently, and just kind of the cool things that have been happening as I've started to try and better myself by getting engaged with some better audiobooks and changing the content that I listen to.
Oh yeah, and I'm so excited about this app too. I have parents who live in Indiana, and so the frustration of trying to get your hands on books that are written by church members for church members. If you don't live in Utah, sometimes it can be hard to get those things unless you order a hard copy of it. Now that we have ebooks, that makes it easier. But I love this. I've been doing some listening on it too, and it's really, really nice, even for me. And I live in Utah, so.
Yeah, I've been loving it on my commute to work. I have about 50 minutes a day of car time, and I'm getting so much out of it. I'm listening to a ton of stuff, and so I shared those blog posts, and I'll put those links in the show notes. So we'll probably put the episode out on Sunday after conference, and so. We enjoy you guys joining us today. We appreciate it. On behalf of Heather, my name is Grady, and until next time, we bid you all a fond adieu.